The deep state has a new and improved tool for the brainwashing of your children, and it gets really, really creepy the further down you go through the rabbit hole. Stay tuned and I'll tell you more. Hey everybody, Alex Newman here with Behind the Deep State, and today I want to talk about social emotional learning, or social and emotional learning. They call it SEL for short. Now, this is the latest deep state tool in its arsenal for the indoctrination, the weaponization, the brainwashing of not just America's children, but children all over the world. If you're outside of the education sector or you don't have kids in a government brainwash camp, you probably never even heard the term SEL before, but trust me, it is all the rage right now when it comes to the school system, especially in light of COVID, and this gets really, really nasty. In fact, the deeper you dig, the more you see that this is not just dangerous, this is evil, and I'm going to show you how. Now, SEL, officially is just this wonderful thing. We're going to teach children how to cope with their emotions and how to be good people and all the rest of it. And, who could be opposed to that, right? If you go to their official definition, if you go to CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, their website is at casel.org. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning at casel.org. They explain it like this: social and emotional learning is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, and establish and maintain positive relationships and make responsible decisions. Wow, that is so wonderful. Can you imagine how did people get along for thousands and thousands of years without SEL? I mean, how did we ever understand and manage our emotions? How did we set and achieve positive goals? How did we feel and show empathy for others? How did we establish and maintain positive relationships? And how did we make responsible decisions before our glorious overlords introduced this SEL to teach us these things? Well, as I'm going to show you, this is not about any of those things. And if you listen carefully to what these people are saying, they will actually tell you what it's about. A big part of it is promoting extremism and a radical far left fringe left wing agenda. And even the folks at CASEL, this is kind of the leading group that is pushing this extremism into the schools. They tell you what they're doing. Let me give you some quotes. They have under a headline on their webpage, SEL as a lever for equity. They say, with a growing number of partners, CASEL is creating a more comprehensive approach to education, one that will lead to a more equitable, just, and productive society. That's interesting. All these left-wing buzzwords, right? Social justice and equity and all the rest of it. That sounds so cute. The more you dig down, the more you find. Listen to this. They also, at this CASEL place, they have a webinar on SEL as a lever for equity and social justice. They have a lecture on how to support anti-racist practices. They have another webinar on how to use SEL to dismantle inequities. Okay? Guys, these people are serious. This is, again, happening in your schools. Listen to this. This comes from another page under SEL competencies. They say SEL competencies can be leveraged to develop justice-oriented global citizens and nurture inclusive school and district communities. Okay, this is going to help the children assess power dynamics and confront issues of race and class across different settings. If this sounds like Marxist claptrap, that's because it is. Okay, these are the exact same terms that the Pantifa lunatics in the street, that the far left-wing extremists have been pushing on us for a long time, and now it's coming into the schools. Well, it's been in there for a while, but now it's coming in this very dangerous manipulative package called SEL, or social and emotional learning. According to this website, the CASEL, again, the main organization promoting this stuff, and it's in public schools all across America, and it's going worldwide. They say children are supposed to develop an understanding of systemic or structural explanations for different treatments and outcomes. This is also known as critical race theory, right? This is the Marxist tool to divide and conquer the American nation by convincing everybody that America is awash in, quote, systemic and structural racism, and that only government social engineering can save us, okay? This is very, very dangerous stuff, guys. Now, a lot of the SEL practitioners, as they like to call themselves, these educrats that are running the school systems, they've been pretty bold about announcing what they're doing as well. Let me give you some examples. In Florida, teachers were actually ordered to show a number of videos to their middle school students. And I want to show you a clip from those videos. This is just really incredible stuff. Check this out.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with. And then suddenly, there's us. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. We who are bisexual, and we who acknowledge the courage of others. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think.
Most women are, told they need to behave a certain way.
People really think that my generation is lazy.
Just another blonde waitress.
Hey, do you rap?
The only black girl.
I didn't belong.
I guess kind of growing up, people made these assumptions about what I was supposed to be, but it was really eye-opening for me to realize that I had been making those same assumptions myself.
We all like to think that we're inclusive, but sometimes we don't actually step back and think, wait a second, did I hear everybody in the room?
Inclusion for me is setting up an environment where everybody is comfortable.
Open to accept other people's opinions.
All individuals, regardless of their diversity, feel welcomed, feel respected.
It means that they don't have to try to be what others expect them to be.
Change is possible, but it takes the right person to make a change happen.
I had a shop floor supervisor who stood up for me and sent out a company-wide email saying that Robin has every legal right to use the women's change rooms. It's funny because you do find allies in some of the strangest places.
One thing we can do to support inclusion is to talk about it.
You have to demonstrate that you're committed to this.
I'm a chef and I forge metals.
A proud mother.
Forklift operator and a truck driver.
I envision a day when we can just be so accepting of each other, where we can make space for others.
So what you just saw, these were videos that middle school teachers were ordered to show to every single one of their children, glorifying and promoting transgenderism, homosexuality, bisexuality. This is where they're going, folks. SEL is about shaping, changing, and transforming the attitudes, the values, the beliefs of your children. And they are being blatant about it, okay? Here's another one. Now, Open Circle director Camilla Drummond Forrester, she wrote an article at edsurge.com where she talked about how SEL needs to be used to teach children all about the race mongering. And she says, teaching white children to be aware of their racial identity would allow them to better understand the privileges that accompany that identity. Okay? Why in the world would you want to teach children about their racial identity? I thought we didn't want a racial society, and yet these SEL mongers, these totalitarians running our school system, are deliberately pushing this. They say social and emotional learning has an important role to play in that education. One of the core competencies we focus on as a necessary foundation for the others is self-awareness. That self-awareness must include race. Okay, now, I've actually consulted my Bible, and I've read it every which way, and there are 0 mentions of the concept of race in my Bible. There's nations, there's tribes, there's tongues, but there's no race. So why do Christian taxpayers, and the great majority of Americans describe themselves as Christian, why do they need to pay to promote unbiblical, pseudo-scientific religious claptrap to children? Why do they need to be made aware of their race? If you even believe that race is a real thing. It's because the totalitarians have a plan. Another article on SEL in EdTech magazine, they talk about how they're going to use SEL-oriented materials from the Zinn Education Project. Zinn obviously was the Communist Party lunatic who wrote the most ridiculous history book about America that I know of, at least. It's called what was it? The People's History of the United States, and it's not actually a history. You might call it a people's pseudo history of the United States, but it's certainly not history. Dr. Mary Grabar has done a phenomenal job debunking that. She did a whole book about it, debunking Howard Zinn, exposing the fake history that turned a generation against America. And so the fact that the SEL, totalitarians, and the Howard Zinn disciples are working together to promote this filth, this nonsense to children in school should not be surprising. Zinn actually described himself as something of a Marxist, and of course he was. He was a member of the Communist Party, according to FBI documents. So why are they pushing this in schools? Well, the answer is very obvious. They want your kids to be little drones, little totalitarian Marxists who hate their families, who hate their countries, and so on. And again, guys, this SEL stuff, it is absolutely everywhere. I interviewed some teachers. I interviewed a lady called Jennifer McWilliams, a wonderful, wonderful teacher in Indiana. She was fired from her job. And if you know anything about the public school system, you know it's very hard to fire teachers. She was fired from her school for exposing the SEL. She said they were imposing these very controversial values on children using SEL, and she decided to speak out. And they fired her for that. She said social emotional learning is rooted in progressive social justice ideology that divides anyone who questions the radical groupthink agenda. Okay, that's what Jennifer McWilliams says. She now leads the Purple for Parents chapter in Indiana. And she says that the purpose is to separate children from God and the nuclear family using propaganda and conditioning, folks. That's what's going on with this SEL. This is the deep state's latest tool. They're promoting comprehensive sexuality education, the Marxist Black Lives Matter narrative, and all the rest of it. And then it gets even creepier, guys. When I mentioned that when you go down the rabbit hole, it gets really dark, I was not kidding. If you go to a history of SEL on CASEL's webpage, they actually admit that they're the ones who came up with this social emotional learning term. And they say that they came up with this idea at a meeting held at the Fetzer Institute. Now, they don't tell you what the Fetzer Institute is, but I dug into it a little bit. It turns out it is the creation of a wealthy New Age guru and very wealthy media baron called John Fetzer. One of the founders of the SEL movement, David Sleuter, was actually the president and CEO of the organization. And if you read on the Fetzer Institute's website, you get a giant dose of reality, and you really understand what's going on here. This is occult, New Age propaganda being used on children. Let me give you some examples. Our mission is to help build the spiritual foundation for a loving world. Oh, that sounds so cute, right? But they're not talking about a spiritual foundation in any sense that Christians or Jews or Muslims might recognize. They are talking about something totally, totally different. Now, a guy called Brian Wilson, he wrote a book on John Fetzer. It was called John E. Fetzer and the Quest for the New Age. And he explained in this book that John Fetzer was a fervent disciple of a New Age guru called Alice Bailey. And we've talked about her before on this show. In fact, when we were talking about globalist education and the UN role in taking over education, we talked a little bit about Alice Bailey. For those of you who don't remember or who maybe didn't watch that episode, Alice Bailey, I'll give you a hint, was the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company. Okay, and this Fetzer character, remember, the SEL originated at the Fetzer Institute. This Fetzer character was so obsessed with Alice Bailey, the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, that they would bring together all their New Age guys at this institute, and they would chant this great invocation developed by Alice Bailey that was prayer revealed to her by these so-called ascended masters that she claimed to be communicating with, these spiritual entities. Now, if you've read your Bible, you know we're not talking about any spiritual entity. We're talking about demons. But this is who Alice Bailey was. And, she's not just some random wackadoodle person. I mean, she is a wackadoodle, clearly. But she actually designed the prayer room for the United Nations. Let me tell you how prominent and how significant she is. We did an episode of this show where we talked about the UN's World Core Curriculum. It was developed by Assistant Secretary General of the UN, Robert Mueller. And what he explained in the foreword to the teacher's manual for his World Core Curriculum is that all of it is based on the philosophy and the teachings of Alice Bailey and her ascended masters. So the World Core Curriculum, which is intimately linked with the Common Core and the emerging globalist education system, is based on the teachings of this wackadoodle Alice Bailey, who provided also the inspiration for the Fetzer Institute, which is where the social and emotional learning nonsense came from. Are you guys starting to get the picture, guys? This is evil. This is straight from the pit of hell. I asked the Fetzer Institute about it. They didn't want to talk. I asked the CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They didn't want to talk about it. But you can be sure that these SEL mongers are not using these advanced psychological manipulation and behavioral manipulation tactics to teach your children Christianity or the Ten Commandments or the Golden Rule or the Lord's Prayer or even really how to think. They're doing it for very nefarious purposes, okay? This is what's going on, guys, with the SEL. And then, to top it all off, the icing on the cake, you look at who is funding this SEL. And once again, it's a who's who of deep state globalist gazillionaires. Obviously, one of the big ones is Bill Gates, the same guy who signed an agreement with UNESCO, the UN Education Agency, in 2004 to create a global educational system that would have global syllabus, global teacher training programs, global curricula, and all the rest of it. Then Bill Gates, of course, went on to fund Common Core with about $2.3 billion of his own money. And it's not because he cares about your children. Cue the video of Bill Gates saying, well, we'll know in about a decade if our education stuff worked.
It would be great if our education stuff worked. But that we won't know for probably a decade.
Yeah, okay, after we brainwash and mess up 77 million American children, we'll find out if it worked, okay? What a Looney Tunes, guys. And this is the guy who's funding social and emotional learning. Also on the list, of course, is the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, which, according to CASEL, provides generous funding to CASEL to support school districts and their capacity to promote social and emotional learning, okay? Are you starting to get the picture, guys? These are deep state swamp monsters who hate America, hate our liberty, they hate you, and they are funding this new brainwashing tool being used in government schools all over the United States and all over the world. And as you go down the list, you see almost everybody involved with this CASEL. When you dig into them, you find more and more craziness. Another one of the big ones is Linda Darling Hammond, who is a board member emeritus of CASEL. She is also a well-known associate of the communist terrorist turned education professor William Ayers, who, of course, bombed the Pentagon, bombed the State Department, bombed Capitol Hill, bombed police officers, murdered cops, and then bombed their funerals, and then got off on a technicality, went into education, and then launched the political career of Barack Hussein Obama. Now, we've talked about this on the show before as well, but just remember this, guys. The guy who infiltrated the leadership of Bill Ayers' terrorist group on behalf of the FBI, a gentleman by the name of Larry Grathwohl, listen to what he said about what this terrorist group that Bill Ayers created was up to.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible then for administrating, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. Now, I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
Now, this Linda Darling Hammond, who of course was a very close associate of the terrorist William Ayres, who wanted to work with foreign communist dictatorships to enslave the American people and exterminate about 25 million of us with help from mass murdering foreign governments, his little friend Linda Darling Hammond went on to try out her educational quackery in California. She actually created these Stanford New Schools, and we've got the data. In 2010, we found out that Stanford New Schools placed in the lowest achieving 5% of all schools in California. So now let's use this quackery on all of America. You're starting to get the picture, guys. You're starting to get the picture. It just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. We have got to stop these people. Now, they are bragging that this SEL is in all the schools. The National Education Association posted on their blog. They had a global learning fellow, and she explained that SEL is the foundation, the heartbeat of the classroom. It's about connecting everybody, right, and making them feel safe. Okay, the U.S. Department of Education, they put out a review, and they said that SEL needs to be everywhere. The entire student body, they said, needs to be subjected to this SEL programming to reinforce social and emotional learning, not only in the classroom, but also on the playground, in the cafeteria, and in the hallways. Parents even need to reinforce it at home. Okay, guys, they are coming for your kids. That is the deep state's secret weapon. They are indoctrinating, brainwashing, sexualizing, and weaponizing your children so that they will eventually wage war on you, on your freedom, on your country, on your churches, and ultimately on God himself. If you love your children, if you love your country, we have got to take action, guys. Get a copy of our wonderful special report, Rescuing Our Children. Here's a copy of it right here. Get 100 copies. Give one to your pastor. Give one to your neighbor. Give one to whoever needs to see it. We go through the whole scam that is the government school system, exposing it from top to bottom. It's time, folks, for us to resist this deep state agenda. The surest and most effective way for an average American to do that is to remove your children from the deep state's indoctrination centers masquerading as schools. I'm Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State. Thank you so much for watching, folks. Go over to our website, thenewamerican.com. Subscribe to the daily headlines. Subscribe to the print magazine. And please share this video. The totalitarians running the big tech companies do not want anybody else to see it. They will do everything possible to bury us. And so we depend on you to get the word out. Thank you, folks, for watching, and God bless you all.
They say every time someone subscribes to the New American Magazine, a member of the Deep State loses his mind. Well, now's your chance to help a lot of Deep State members lose their mind. Head over to thenewamerican.com, subscribe to the magazine, subscribe to our daily, weekly, or monthly headlines, and let's beat the Deep State into the ground. I'm Alex Newman. Thanks for watching.